If you felt a bit more Christian today, if you felt a bit more in touch with your religious side, that's because on this day, 925 years ago, the First Crusade finally ended after recapturing Jerusalem. And starting from there, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, lasting almost 100 years, before Paladin came around and whooped everybody's ass, but we won't talk about that today. Talking about whooping asses, we are talking about the healers in the raid and their performance after the beta testing in the War Within beta. We have looked at the DPS already, so now it's time to check how the healers have been doing. Similar to what we did for the DPS in our temporary tier list of performance, this time though we are going to immediately get a spoiler, because we are going to immediately be putting Holy Paladin into the S tier. Now this is your default run-of-the-mill raid Holy Paladin build. You might have a very few handful of changes, but the general build will stay like this. Now the reason why Holy Paladin is in the S tier, it's quite boring actually. It's because it's just too strong. You know, this is a common sight when looking at some mythic log in the beta. You just look at a bunch of healers, you know, kind of being close to each other, fighting for scraps, and then there is a guy almost doubling their HPS, and that's always a Holy Paladin. That is what is going down right now. The thing that is making Holy Paladin right now way over the top is the series of buffs given to their two spenders, Eternal Flame and Light of Dawn. More importantly, the rework of taking away Glimmer from Holy Shock and actually buffing the base healing of Holy Shock, and not really changing that much else in terms of talents you are picking up here and there, has created a situation where it doesn't even matter what you click as a Holy Paladin. As long as you remember to click Holy Shock whenever it's up, you are done. You can have a build where you're just playing with Holy Shock and also just alternating your spenders, AoE spender, single target spender. You're playing with Crusader Strike, you're not really casting Flash of Light, and you're not playing with Beacon of Virtue, you're instead playing with the double beacon, right? And the result is that you do some, you know, ridiculous healing compared to everybody else. Or maybe you can just ignore all of that. You can go back to playing only Light of Dawn and Holy Shock, not even bothering with Eternal Flame. You can go back to playing Flash of Light without playing with Crusader Strike, and that is still going to give you a ridiculously high result. Again, you can just skip to something completely different. Single target abilities only. We don't play with Light of Dawn around these parts. However, we like being in melee, so we go back to using Crusader Strike, and we also like Beacon of Virtue, so we go back to playing with Beacon. And even this Paladin with a completely different set of buttons, again, top results. And that's the thing right now with Holy Paladin. As long as you're pressing Holy Shock, whether you're using mostly a single target spender, or you're trying to mix the single target and the AoE spender, or you're using both of them, if you're being in melee with Crusader Strike, or if you're getting your Holy Power via cast heals, doesn't matter. The result is that nobody else besides another Paladin is actually matching up to your HPS. So right now, that's the gist of the overpowered Holy Paladin stuck into the S tier. Below Holy Paladin though, not by much actually, they're still doing quite well, and they have been doing well since the beginning, the very first beta test. And that happens to be Mistweaver. You know, week by week, set of testing after set of testing, even at the end of June, when we got into the mythic testing of the raid, Mistweaver was amongst the better performer, and now into the latest set of tuning, Mistweaver continues to be the basically best performer right after Holy Paladin. Now this is your run-of-the-mill Mistweaver build in the raid, of course not playing fist weaving, which is one of the benefits of Mistweaver. You can have fun playing two different types of builds, whether it is Mythic Plus or the raid. You can even try to sneak in the more fist weaving version in the raid, but for now we are looking at a more traditionally, you know, hard cast healing abilities in your build. Now, not much is changing for Mistweaver, which makes sense because they were already doing very well in Season 3 and 4 of Dragonflight when it comes to raid healing. They had to be nerfed multiple times because of their raid healing as well, so not really a surprise that their current situation is very similar. They do tons of healing with Enveloping Mist, and then the other part is going to be Vivify, which most of the time will mean Invigorating Mist part of Vivify. After you have spread enough Renewing Mists, you can spam some Vivify for splash AoE healing. Not many things are changing, you know, if you go back to the talent tree and you search for Enveloping Mist, you will see that still there is a ton of synergy around this ability. Now, you're still effectively double casting also Renewing Mist every time you use Enveloping Mist. You get a whole bunch of different buffs to make Enveloping Mist stronger, either because it heals for more, either because it has more charges, because it lasts for more, and your usual loyal Rising Mist to extend the duration of your HOTS, including extending the duration of your Renewing Mist, which means they are up on more people, which means when you spam your Vivify, you get to AoE heal more. Now, it's just slightly better, because without receiving too many negative changes to your tree, recently in Dragonflight, one of the most positive changes you've gotten is the massive set of buffs to Mana Tea, giving you effectively infinite mana if you manage this ability properly in the raid compared to other healers, and the addition of a new cooldown, because Conduit of the Celestials gives you an extra cooldown, and you can see it helps you smooth out your 1 to 1.5 minute burst windows. You see the red here is your cooldown, so it does add more, it does make your burst healing a bit more uniform and less spiky. So practically they are still very powerful, and now they have an even better set of cooldowns, which wasn't admittedly very powerful before, while playing with Conduit of the Celestials. Now, talking about the other healers in these past few results that have been more or less the more consistent behind these two, it's Restoration Shaman. This is your standard default build. You have a handful of talents that you can play around with at the very top end. You can choose to get rid of Undercurrent to get your points into Primordial Wave. You can still ignore these to get your deeply rooted elements and even Earth Living Weapon. You can still ignore Earth Living Weapon because after all it's garbage, and play with Tidewaters still, but the rest of the talent tree is mostly locked on. And this talent tree is locked on to do a bunch of chain healing. Blizzard tried to depower Chain Heal, or at the very least make Healing Surge just a little bit better, but that's not really gonna be a thing in the raid. In the raid, Chain Heal is still king. In Mythic Plus, you will definitely find more use for Healing Surge. You can go for Undulation in Mythic Plus, you can actually benefit from this buff. It's more likely you even go for Farseer possibly, because of the synergy with Undulation, but in the raid, it's just still too powerful to play around Chain Heals and to essentially expend all of the buffs around Chain Heal, whether it's the buff from Whirling Elements, or it's the buff from your own Tidal Waves, or it's the buff from Unleashed Life, or maybe from High Tide. You just keep expanding them over and over every time they pop, whenever there is something to actually heal in the fight. You have gotten a slight improvement after the, I guess, mini rework, which is Downpour. Now Downpour is actually a proper good ability. You can see here every cast is almost 4 million healing in this log. In this log it's 3 million, in this log it's 3.8 million. You know, it's matching an Earthen Wall Totem in terms of value, and Earthen Wall Totem has a 1 minute cooldown, whereas Downpour is only activated via Surging Totem, so every 24 seconds, which is much more often than Earthen Wall Totem. That's the main addition you have gotten in your talent tree in terms of playstyle, basically. And then Spirit Link. To be fair, we have to point this out, a lot of this extra average HPS is given by the free high healing that now your Spirit Link is doing. You can see here, and then you can also see it here second, and then you can also see it here. Now, for a while this was bugged. It was not reducing the healing past however many few targets it was. I think it was past 5 targets, yes. It wasn't reducing it, so it was getting a gigantic heal to everyone. So this is also affecting the results in here. Considering your average Spirit Link is giving you way more HPS than it should, well over 100,000 more HPS than it should, this is bound to be lower down. It's not nearly as powerful as it is being shown right now in the logs. Besides the Spirit Link, which is still incredibly powerful and one of the, if not the strongest, raid cooldown available right now, the rest of the build is still very smooth. The changes have made it, yes, still very centered around Chain Heal, but unless you are really annoyed by the amount of Chain Heal casts, the spec plays very well. It's got very strong cooldowns. Yes, we still have the pet peeve of being quite squishy, but besides that, it's doing very well. Now after them, in results, you have gotten the Preservation Evoker. Preservation Evoker wasn't really changed before this last set of raid testing, so we can go even further back in the even previous results at the beginning of July to see that even in Mythic testing, for example, Preservation Evoker was still doing very well and continues to be quite high in the results. Now, there isn't even particularly a point in giving you the default build of Evoker for the raid, because right now Evoker doesn't have a default build in the raid. Why? Because you can, go in and do the Blossom build. Oh crap, I have to get rid of this, and all of these don't matter anymore. I have to go and start picking up all of the Blossom talents, because now you're playing the Blossom build with Flame Shaper. And then you go to a different Evoker, and now it's Spirit Bloom, Dream Breath, Chrono Warden. So like, oh crap, I have to go back, get rid of all of these. Now we are playing again our Echo Reversion type of build. Hold on a second, why aren't we using Reversion? Let's just play a build that actually uses Reversion. So we spread our Echoes with our Temporal Anomaly, and then we use Reversion as a finisher way more than we use Dream Breath. How about neither of them? How about we just do everything at once? We play the Reversion build while still playing with Dream Breath with our Echoes, but then we also spend our Essence with Emerald Blossoms. Why not? Wait, we haven't even mentioned Living Flame. Why don't we play the Verdant Embrace Lifebind version? So we spend all of our Echoes and our Temporal Anomaly Verdant Embracing people for an instant heal, then we have the Lifebind buff left behind, and we spend our Living Flames and Dream Breaths and Spirit Blooms to heal with Lifebind. That's why there is not much of a point to put a default talent tree for Evoker, because you have approximately 6 different ways to play and still do well. That is definitely currently the highlight of the performances of the raid results for Evoker. It will be funny if in the end, even with all of these different cool and workable builds, you end up being benched anyways by the one spec that has one playstyle and one build and doesn't really care about all your different ways of playing. That could happen, that could be a thing, but for now it is doing very well, and it has many different ways in how you want to approach spending your essences. We are now approaching the garbage bin, as we have been talking multiple times about the bottom 3 that have been bottom 3 for a while now, Disc, Holy and Restoration, starting with Resto. Resto is very similar to before, except now it's gotten slightly worse. The feeling of weakness, particularly around your Flourish, which at this point is actually not even being taken by the majority of the Druids in the raid testing, something like 70-30 on the Druids giving up on even bothering picking up Flourish. That's a problem, because Flourish is your one main cooldown. Yes, you have Trunk, but Trunk is a meme. What's powerful about you were your rejuvenation ramps into Flourish. Now, without even those, your healing profile, first of all, is much more flat. It's much more consistent, which is not very good with how we have known Blizzard developing raids, which is with quite high spikes of damage where you need cooldowns for, and if your one decent cooldown isn't even that powerful now, like in the case of Resto Druid, that's an even bigger problem. Even with this slight change of Flourish, the rest is practically the same. You're still just, I've picked 3 different healers. It's like they are replicated by the AI. You just do the same exact thing. You make sure you have 2 charges of your Swiftment for your Reforestation before the damage is coming. 10 to 15 seconds before the damage is about to come, you spam a whole bunch of Rejues, and then you do Swiftment into Wild Growth. You turn into a tree, you get some empowered Rejues to cast. As you're doing this, if you have stored them, you pop 3 Grove Guardians at once, and that's it. So this is still a throughput problem in the sense that you need some, 20% buff in terms of healing, but also possibly a direct buff to Flourish, which has been nerfed a while ago in an intent from Blizzard to making the raid cooldowns weaker. Flourish used to heal for way more. Before it was upwards of 100% of the rate of your heals over time, and then became 25%. From 100. Even if you cut 30 seconds of your cooldown, if you make it so much weaker that you even start losing some identity in your healing profile. Now you heal every minute with your Flourish. Now you don't even have that in terms of power anymore for Resto Druid. After them, the other one kind of in the gutter based on the results was Holy Priest. Similar, really. This is your generic Holy Priest in the raid. You can change a couple of things in here, especially if you want to go for more Holy Wars CDR. You just swap Resonant Words that buff your Circle of Healing for Light of the Naur and you're done. However, that's not even a thing anymore, because when you look at the healing done by the Priest, it's practically now Halo City. Now your healing profile is very clear. Now you can see the profile of the healing of the Holy Priest minus this one, who dumped all of its cooldowns together. Most of the others will have this 1 minute-ish sets of healing centered mostly around your Halo HPS. And that's where your spenders lose a lot. Because you see here your Sanctify and Serenity are even losing to Circle of Healing, to Flash Heal even, to Prayer of Mending still. Their value is losing out a lot. You're losing a tier set, which gives you free charges of your Holy Word. You are not bothering to put into talents that actually buff these Holy Words, but instead they buff other heals like Circle of Healing. You have a hero talent which buffs your Flash Heal by a lot, thanks to this Empower Surges talent. And practically the only new thing for your Holy Words is this. Consuming Surge of Light, getting you a 4-second CDR on your Sanctify, but that's about it. The rest is mostly just about the 1 minute window power of healing with Halo, which is funny to talk about because we just talked about a Resto Druid healer who has somewhat lost their identity of 1 minute CD healer with their Flourish ramp, and now Priest has its own with Halo. I will still remind everyone, sort of as an excuse, as a cope, that the power of Holy Priest is much bigger than this. Don't forget that besides giving DPS power infusion, which has its own value, they also have a lot of healing missing because of their Divine Hymn. For those who don't know, Divine Hymn over time will give you upwards of 20% more healing done by all healers, by all players, for 15 seconds. And you also take Gales of Song to increase it up to 25%. This means that, just to make an example, if you're using your Divine Hymn, which right now shows as a pathetic 12 million healing after using it twice, if you use it, for example, here with a big number, right? The moment you're casting this and upwards of 15 seconds later, so upwards until 4:06 or so, every heal in the raid, not just yours, every heal is being buffed by 25%. So this 125 million healing, not 25% because it stacks over time, the healing increase. So on average, 17 or so percent of this healing is of the Holy Priest. So we're talking about at or upwards of 20 million extra healing per cast of Divine Hymn. So you cast it twice in this fight, that's 40 million more healing. That's 385. You are now first. It's just something that you cannot see, because you are in the cack shed and you are buffing the other healers, so they're gonna be doing more healing thanks to you. And unlike Resto Druid, who not only has less HPS, but also has an identity crisis in terms of what do they want to do with their healing, with their cooldowns, with their window of healing burst, the Holy Priest one is actually fine. Now it's even more defined thanks to Halo. It's just a matter of slight HPS buffs, improvements to some of their abilities to make them perfectly viable. The last on this list, which has been towards the bottom 3 for practically forever, is Discipline. So Discipline does have a handful of talent options. Do you want to play with Mindbender and have a Mindbender out every 20 or so seconds, or are you still fine with using Shadow Fiend every minute or so? If you're fine, then you play with Will and Woe. If you're not, you just pick Mindbender. Will and Woe has gotten buffed significantly in the War Within because this talent buffs your Smite, which is a terrible spell, so nobody took this in Dragonflight. However, with the Void Weaver hero talent, your Smite turns into Void Blast, which is significantly stronger. Not only is it stronger in the spell power damage, but also because it turns into a shadow spell, and you have multiple talents that synergize with you doing more shadow damage or more healing thanks to shadow spells. So being able to buff this one by 160% every time you cast Penance after having used 2 Radiances, because you get 4 stacks of Harsh Discipline. Penance fires 3 bolts, it fires 4 with Castigation, it fires 8 with Harsh Discipline, and Will and Woe stacks up 8 times. That's the only practically minor change if you even go for this when it comes to Discipline talents. If you want to see any other changes, then it's gonna be nerfs, namely to Rapture. Besides this, there isn't much to mention for Discipline because you all know how Discipline works, right? Discipline works like this. That's what you expect from a Discipline Priest, right? That's what you expect from a Discipline Priest, right? A very clear profile. We just mentioned Restoration Druid has somewhat of a lack of identity right now, and that Holy Priest has one, but it's slightly undertuned. For Discipline it's the same, but possibly even worse, because unlike the case of Holy Priest where an HPS fix would just, fix this, for Discipline it's not even that. Their tier set is practically unusable with the way they want to ramp. The nerf to Rapture is terrible for their ramping with Power Wall Shields only. Even the ramp itself, playing with Void Weaver, is kind of clunky because a lot of the final burst of healing that can come from Collapsing Void is out of sync with the duration of your atonements, because this one blows up when your Entropic Rift blows up, and your Entropic Rift blows up 11 seconds later, and 11 seconds after casting Mind Blast you have lost a lot of your atonement, so this one exploding for a ton of damage doesn't actually do nearly as much because a lot of your atonements will be gone by then. You are still completely trapped, as we talked about before, by Void Summoner and your reliance on spamming Smite to get back your cooldowns for Shadow Fiend. So that is still a problem, and the strictness of your talents and the badness of your talents, like the inability to make proper use of Ultimate Penitence as a proper cooldown, for example, are leaving you in a pretty bad state. It is still likely Discipline Priest will be part of any kind of high level progression, because the burst HPS that they can still bring, even if they are terrible outside of it, that is mostly where they lose out on the HPS. When you see this, it's not that in top HPS require moments Holy Paladin is absolutely destroying a Discipline Priest. When you see this, for example, Discipline Priest can still have some peaks of HPS that can match or even pass easily a Holy Paladin in many windows of healing. Here is your Holy Paladin, and then here you have the Discipline Priest. The problem is that when you don't have your burst, you just lose too much, healing, too much HPS over time compared to other healers. Those bumps looked really good, but then when you compare them to the average healing outside of those bumps, you just lose too much as a Discipline Priest, which is where you get this number to be much lower, 30, 40, even 50% lower than the ones ahead of you. That's the biggest thing that needs fixing when it comes to Discipline Priest. So this was the recap after analyzing the results in the raid, in the latest raid testing of the War Within beta when it comes to healers and their current state. So not actually much has changed in the past few weeks. We were asking for buffs to Resto Druid, Holy Priest and Discipline Priest, still not coming, and nerfs to Holy Paladin and Mistweaver. The ones to Mistweaver haven't come, the one to Holy Paladin have come and did nothing, as Holy Paladin continues to be very powerful. So waiting any further changes, especially since we are getting close to another reset tomorrow in a couple of days, where we might see even more changes. Maybe some will have to do with the current state of healers in the beta. But for today, we are now leaving each other, as it's getting kind of late. Thanks, of course, as usual, for watching the video, as well as for supporting for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, Jesus, my throat was so parched. I shouldn't have gone on to finish this video before drinking.